Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Madam Superintendent. Today I really would like to take a moment to talk about our comprehensive plan for learning recovery in response to the COVID-19 learning loss. Our foundation for success as a district really rests in your core beliefs and commitments, and really all that you have articulated and established to maintain our core business of teaching and learning in Henry's Plan of Action that now sits next to the understandings, the priority outcomes, and those strategic actions that have been outlined in our strategic plan. I firmly believe that this foundation, most notably the aligned system for teaching and learning in policy BAB, as well as your other reform policies, results in us not being in the dire situation predicted around the nation as a result of COVID-19. However, we do have to recognize that we do have students for whom this has been difficult, and even though we are not seeing early indicators of wholesale decline in student performance as a district, we have to make sure that we are identifying any gaps that individual students have as a result of the last 8 months of learning. So as such, today I want to provide you, our board, and our community with 3 assurances to make sure that we are addressing learning loss, that we have a plan to accelerate learning, to close those gaps now, in the summertime, as well as into the next school year. As a district, we will ensure that there is 1, proactive monitoring and acceleration of reading proficiency. Number 2, that we address essential standards and skills gaps in ELA and mathematics. And lastly, that we will support students in high school to recover course credits that they need to graduate. Let's take a look at these 3 assurances. So assurance 1, proactively addressing reading proficiency aligns tightly to this board's clear commitment to reading on or above grade level and the idea that every student will end the year with a year's growth in reading or more in a year's time. It's really a critical component to you all and has been adopted as a big part of our strategic plan. So on the screen are the assurances that we make here today. First, we will frequently monitor student reading progress using the tools that are currently being provided as a district, with deeper monitoring happening with our younger grades where that student reading foundation is really developed. Second, when we see gaps now, we will intervene now and provide opportunities to students to accelerate this winter and spring using the tools available in all of our schools thanks to you and the acquisition of Read 180, System 44, and other core resources we have for reading in our schools. And then on May 7th, we ensure that all students K-9 will be provided with their end-of-year reading proficiency level. If a student's data indicates that they are a year or more behind where they should be at that point, an individual reading plan is going to be provided to that student that may include access or an invitation to the types of programming that you see listed here, both for the summer as well as when we start back in August. All right, our second assurance is that gaps in a student's mastery of their essential skills and standards will be addressed now and again as needed to be in the summer as well as during the school year. So as you know from the report that was provided by Mr. Schrum in December, the Henry teaching and learning progressions have been modified. Remember that we have adjusted them for the pace to be able to make sure that as we look to this semester, we've recognized the need to get accelerated in our learning on the progressions and standards. And remember that for the next 2 weeks, our teachers in K-8 have been provided with 2 weeks of time to be able to review the standards and skills from first semester to ensure that new learning starts only when we have addressed the gaps that exist from first semester. So I think it's important to note that all of this is being done to address these gaps in real time. We're not waiting till the end of the year to determine what those gaps are, but instead looking as we go to make sure that we're closing them. Currently, as a district, we use the Measuring Academic Progress Assessment, the MAP assessment. You've heard me talk about that before, 3 times a year as our interim assessment to measure student progress. So we give the map at the beginning of the school year. We are wrapping up in the next week or so the second administration or the mid-year administration of our map assessment. And once that second window closes, it's going to give our leaders and our teachers the ability to really look at the student data and determine where we have students that are in need of immediate intervention and thus acceleration as we look at student progress this semester. So similarly, teachers and teacher collaborative teams are going to continue to use our common formative assessments aligned to the standards to monitor learning in real time, make instructional decisions for the whole class, for groups of students in a class, or ultimately for individual students, depending on what is needed using those formative assessments, and do that now. Again, not waiting, but real time. And then similar to the assurance for reading proficiency, that week of May 7th, using the data from the third administration of our MAP assessment, any student in K-9 that is identified in the lowest tier of expected growth for math and ELA will be provided opportunities, shown here again, for summer and school year support designed specifically to help close their gaps. And then lastly, our last assurance is that we are going to continue to support our high school students who are in need of full course recovery, both from the spring of 2020 as well as students today. So remember that last month we shared that students who had received COVID incompletes and had unsuccessfully been able to change that incomplete to a passing score, at the end of the term, those reverted to the earned grade that they had from the end of last semester, or spring semester of 2020, I should say. But you'll remember that we also added the caveat that during this semester, students who still have that score in a course needed for graduation will be provided additional opportunities from now through May to be able to, again, repair that grade and get that course required for graduation finished up from the spring so that they can ensure that they have the courses they need for graduation. So right now, we have counselors across our district working with students and families to put a plan together for each student to ensure that the best possible path for that student to be able to recoup those grades and be able to recoup those credits is underway right now. So this semester, we also are ensuring that teachers are going to use the tools that they have at their disposal to ensure that they're monitoring. We talked about that in the last assurance, monitoring ongoing, addressing those gaps as we go. We really do know that students best are served when they are having their gaps addressed in the midst of the classroom instruction. And again, not waiting to do something at the end of the term. But we also know that there are some students who have a hard time getting across that finish line in May, and there is sometimes a need to be able to have an opportunity to repair those grades. So what we are also looking for this year is to ensure that students who are in that situation in core courses required for graduation have the opportunity to be invited to a 2-week grade repair at the start of the summer in order to repair those kids who are close, who are just needing a little bit of extra support to get that just across the finish line for them. And so we have a lot of schools that are already doing that. This will just be now a consistent practice across all of our high schools. And then as we have for most of our summers, we will also be offering the ability for students to retake full courses in order to get caught up in areas that they need for credits, as well as the way that they can get ahead on their credits through an accelerated opportunity during a summer school. So of course this would, as normal, be at the cost to the student, but we are in the process of looking at the potential of needs-based assistance as available. So these 3 assurances are here to proactively address the gaps or loss that is really critical for us to stay ahead of the curve. You know, it is always our goal every day to address student performance needs, again, in real time, and that has not changed because of COVID-19. It has just made it stronger. We hope that the students who will need to take advantage of this opportunity that I just shared will be few. But we also need to be ready to accelerate their learning in a systematic way so that we minimize any long-term impact. And while these assurances really are specific to the loss of learning that is existing as a result of COVID-19, your board policies and the regulations that accompany them on promotion and retention, and grading systems make very clear how grades and student performance are calculated, communicated, and addressed. And unlike last spring, where we had to waive these policies because of the nature of our quick turn to remote learning with COVID-19, this year, grades will be calculated in accordance with the regulation, and all will be part of a student's record. And I really think that this is important to note that students with significant gaps in learning, so not just gaps that are existing as a result of COVID-19, but gaps that show an accumulation of a much larger concern for student mastery, will be and are being addressed with the procedures that have been outlined in the promotion and retention policy and accompanying regulation. So that early notification that started back in October has already happened, and we know that it will continue to happen as we come through this semester. And so families should already know, they were informed starting in October, that their child is at a serious academic risk that could potentially lead to a recommendation for retention. And so all of these expectations remain this year, unlike the end of 2020. These are still in place. And then later this week, all of these assurances, as well as all the ways in our normal operations of schools, our teachers and leaders seek to ensure that student learning happens, is going to be published to our website for our families and our communities. And this adorable little learner from Henry is our cover model for this comprehensive look at how we identify and intervene for learners who need it in every school in every year. And it will contain a special section that specifically addresses these assurances we talked about today for the COVID-19 learning loss in response, and those will be added in addition. So, Madam Superintendent, that completes my report. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Ms. Morse. Madam Chair, that concludes what we have prepared, but remain available for any discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Davis, and thank you, Mrs. Morse. Is there any discussion at this time? Dr. Nutt?
Thank you, because teachers, we are staying up at night trying to figure out how we're going to get our children where they need to be. And this is very frustrating to me as a special ed teacher this year. I feel like if I could have been in front of them and guided them, I would have had a better, I don't think I'm doing a very good job because I feel like I'm behind. This has given me some time to catch them up, if you will. Will all the teachers, I guess I'm interested now in, will all our teachers be required to do like extended learning, summer weekends, long extended time? Will everybody, or just the ones who want to do it?
I think it'll be the coalition of the willing, working with principals and administrators in the building. We recognize that a lot of teachers are going to need to take a deep breath come early June, and so we will look to the teachers who want to participate in the opportunities we're going to give to students, but we would never require that of our teachers.
Will this be face-to-face or virtual or both?
I think it's going to be a combination of the two. The plans are really currently in the early stages of development, but we recognized last year that we were able to successfully provide a face-to-face opportunity for our students in the elementary and middle school grades for sure last summer. That was quite successful. So we know we can do it, and so we're hoping to be able to have a combination of either depending on what the need is for the family.
And is this just for the early learners, the K through, does this include everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Have we looked at doing like an evening academy, extended time for that also?
So in my next board report, we're going to talk about next year.
Sorry about that.
And one of those things we are looking at is an evening academy for students. You're going to steal my thunder, Dr.
I'm
Nutt.
sorry. I just know what I'm going through and the frustration I feel. I feel like I cannot be the Lone Ranger. There are others. And this is so assuring to know that we're going ahead and we're setting some guidelines already, and this is just January. And so trust me, this is like, thank you. So I know the teachers will appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nutt. Mrs. Edwards?
Thank you. My first question is, how important is the MAP data when we talk about closing the achievement gap, since there's no state testing this year and last year as well?
Sure. So we do have our fall milestones that our students took in December. So we will have one piece of state data that we'll be able to look at. But to your question specifically about MAP, we recognize the idea that MAP being given under this current circumstance, where some students are at home and some students are in the classroom, may not be the way we would want for the MAP test to be administered. We take the value that it provides us in looking at that next to student performance in the classroom. And so we have a couple of different data points to be able to look at, to be able to look to determine where are we needing to move students, common formative assessment data as well. So while the MAP administration isn't the way we'd love it to be in a normal school year, we still feel like that data is very useful for us, and it's something that we can look at to be able to look at a student's growth over the course of the school year, and then also to use it in comparison to last year when students were taking that assessment before we went out for a COVID pandemic. So it gives us a point of reference to be able to look and see what is the difference between students when they took this in 1920 versus 2021. So we feel like the MAP still provides us a good value to be able to look at what student progress and individual students are making, and it gives us one really important piece of data to sit next to others to make good decisions for kids.
Okay, my next question is, and maybe this question is for Dr. Davis. I know we're talking about summer school, and that's going to be a cost to the system because we have to pay the teachers. So can CARES dollars be used to fund summer school?
I mean, we're really not to the point of constructing the financial commitment of this entire comprehensive framework, but CARES dollars is an eligible source for all learning loss and learning intervention strategies, and certainly might be a recommendation that may come out of our team to the board as we prepare FY22.
Okay.
But we're not quite there yet.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Edwards. Mr. McDaniel?
Thank you, Ms. Morse, for this presentation. And I've always echoed the sentiments of, our teachers are doing the best that they can in the unpredicted and unseen circumstance. The question I have is, you stated that our students normally attend Sunday school. I'm thinking about church. Normally attend summer school at a cost. And the question that I have is, this is unparalleled. This is an unforeseen time. And many students are struggling because of being pulled back and forth, face-to-face virtual, face-to-face virtual. Some cannot learn virtually. So therefore, the question I have is, what is the cost, or what would be the cost if we were to waive that fee this one time? We've got to show that our parents and our students that we understand what you're going through, and that we are not going to financially penalize you for your student. And I'm not saying that that's the goal of us, but optically that's what it seems is, hey, you didn't make it, so now you got to pay to catch up. And I'm just wondering, what would it look like if we were to one time say, hey, we understand what you're going through, and for this time we're not going to ask for you to financially pay for getting caught up. I'm just asking a question.
Yeah, so I don't have those numbers to be able to give that to you right away, but we can certainly, Dr. Davis, look at what the expense of summer school has been in previous years, coupled with the number of students we're looking at potentially having interest in that to determine what that cost would be. Sure.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McDaniel. Mrs. Pope?
Yes, thank you. I'm really encouraged to know first that we're not seeing this widespread loss of learning. That's really encouraging, a huge testament to what is happening, the tireless work that is being put in by our teachers and our parapros. I'm just so grateful. But I also am glad that you started off with our commitment to each child learning at or above grade level, and that's where we're having to really put our work in here. So I'm so grateful that we acquired those resources a couple of years ago that will make addressing these learning gaps effective, efficient, and consistent across the board. We didn't know just how useful those would be at the time, but I do want to ask you, you mentioned credit repair, And just as a former classroom teacher and just curious, are there any eligibility requirements for a student to participate in credit repair so that we don't have a situation where a student has not put forth any effort, turned in any assignments, and then thinks that they can make up an entire semester in 2 weeks' time at the expense of our teachers' time and effort?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we're in the beginning stages of designing all of these pieces, but typically those credit repair programs are designed for the students who get close. So a student who has exhibited a lot of hard work and determination throughout the semester, but just missed it by a little bit at the end. Each school will devise their plan to be able to address their students accordingly, with guidance obviously from our division as well as Mr. Shrum's, to make sure that it's consistently applied. But yes, credit repair is not for any student who has received a failing grade, but instead that student who is close enough where 2 weeks is legitimate for them to be able to repair that grade.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mrs. Pope. And thank you so much for that report, Mrs. Morse. That's wonderful. Dr. Davis?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to underscore that there is a national level of attention being given to the conditions that learning has caused for children, and that there is this widespread anxiety around these unprecedented learning losses. What I believe our Henry County community can hear today is that because this board has been dedicated to student learning staying our core business throughout this unusual circumstance, that we are not waiting to find out what that might look like next year. It is 6 months before next year even begins, and this framework is a reflection of all of the emerging gaps that we are anticipating. And I think, the questions and the discussion really start driving how we make this take shape with some teeth and begin educating each of our schools on how this becomes customized for their deployment of learning loss recovery. I just want to applaud the tremendous work that is behind what you are leading in this moment, because it really is a reflection of this board's commitment to the pledge that families can have that we will not leave their child's learning to chance if they're learning in a Henry County classroom, on campus or remotely, however that may be. So thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much for that. It's a wonderful report.